meditation is not a closed-eyed process. Meditation is an open-eyed process, which means it is not just sitting at a particular time in a particular place with your eyes closed. It is the way we engage with life itself. Meaning, if you're an accountant, you can be an accountant and be meditating. If you're an engineer, you can be doing your programming in a meditative state. What is that meditative state? Meditative state is where, through knowledge, as some of you said, you realize that it is a mind's job to be turbulent. It's a mind's nature to be volatile. You don't need to interfere in that process. You be a sakshi and observe the mind. So sidestepping the mind does not mean running away from the mind. Sidestepping from the mind does not mean I I lose all joy in life. No. Sidestep of mind is saying it's the mind's nature at the moment because of my own reinforcements in the past. It's the mind's nature to be volatile. See, the most important thing is this. You know you're sad, right? Sad is experience. You can experience sadness in your mind. And sometimes in the COVID-19 lockdown, we've had our own ups and downs. I'm sure you've had your ups and downs, more downs than ups, probably. So, you know you're sad, but you're sad about being sad. That makes you sad. For example, you not having able to leave your house in 6 months makes you sad. But you're sad about the fact that that makes you sad. So suffering is a second level function, meaning not able to leave your house for 6 months is not a happy thing, it's a sad thing. You're taking suffering from it. It's a little subtle thing to understand. So when we say you are experiencing sadness, you are taking suffering out of sadness. Sidestepping the mind is not trying to make your mind happy because of a lockdown. No, that is trying to, this modern pop psychology, where typical Hollywood movie keeps saying everything is going to be okay and stuff. Even when a child is about to be killed, the parent will tell the child everything is going to be okay. No, that is brainwashing, isn't it? Everything is not going to be okay, Dad. The villain has a gun on my head. How can you say everything is going to be okay? No, that's not what we're talking about. Sidestepping the mind is the process of understanding that it is mind's nature to be sad because you've reinforced yourself for 35 years that going out and having fun and frolic is your idea of a good time. So when your mind does not get that, the mind is a slave to reinforcement, so it's obviously going to feel sad. You don't need to take suffering to that sadness. How? By being Sakshi Chaitanya, by being a Sakshi, by observing that it's mind's play to be good and bad. It's like if you have a little puppy dog in your house. It's the puppy's nature, it's a dog's nature to be a little naughty, isn't it? Because it's a dog, it's a cute dog. But what do you tell a dog if it's a little naughty? You love it more, isn't it? You kind of cuddle it more, you kind of pamper it more. Of course, you discipline it now and then, but you don't take offense at the dog's behavior. Why? Because you're able to assess a dog for what it is. Give an example, isn't it? Even if you come back home, you're wearing this kind of a elegant dress. If you're ladies, if you're wearing an elegant dress, which is and your dog kind of jumps on you and it kind of messes it up, you're not angry at the dog. You only, I mean, if you're angry at the dog, you want to slap the dog, yeah, that is something wrong with you, isn't it? Because you're able to quickly assess what a dog is and what's not. However, sidestepping the mind is you're not trying to hate yourself for being sad. You're not trying to control that urge of feeling bad that you are in a lockdown. You're able to see that your mind is sad, and you're able to see your mind is sad because of your reinforcements. But you're playing Sakshi to that sadness. You're neither taking away that sadness, nor are you suffering because of the sadness. Sadness comes, sadness goes. You are that Sakshi that is observing that. Happiness comes, happiness goes. You are the Sakshi. Sakshi is witness, not Dhoni's wife. Sakshi is witness, right? Who's observing that. Um, Ecstasy comes, ecstasy goes. You are that business. Aren't you that constant feeling of I am upon which all of these emotions come and go? Isn't it? You've always experienced that feeling of I am, you exist, that agency upon which you feel I am happy, I am sad, isn't it? Hasn't your mind always been an object of experience for you, never the subject? You are the subject which is experiencing your mind all the time, isn't it? As Varsha said, you identify your mind as you, which is fine because you're only experiencing your mind. But you've always been that experiencer, isn't it? And that experiencer has never changed from your childhood to now. That experiencer, it's not that that experiencer has become 30 years older. That feeling of I am, that existence, this moment, if you close your eyes, that feeling of agency, that feeling of that I am hasn't really aged, isn't it? That I am cannot really smell or taste or fear or be happy. That I am is just that electricity that illumines the bulb, isn't it? That I am illumines your mind being sad, that I am illumines your mind being happy, that I am illumines whatever the composition of your mind is. That's why at certain times 10 years ago, that I am illumined the composition of your mind then, where you used to probably cry if CSK or RCB lost a match. 10 years later, since you don't watch cricket so much, RCB or CSK losing does not matter much to you. Right? What kind of a, why is it not affecting you? RCB losing the match is still constant, but you're not taking suffering at that anymore because your priorities of your mind has changed, isn't it? So there is sad, the the if you go back to Buddha, the two arrows, the first arrow is still the same. The second arrow, the suffering you take from it has changed. But in both cases, the I am, your own self, the feeling of your existence, illumines all of it impartially. So it doesn't try to interfere to your mind. It illumines everything. It's like light illumines everything. Light illumines a ditch. Light illumines the Alps in Switzerland. Light doesn't differentiate. Similarly, yourself, your feeling of I am doesn't differentiate. It shines through the composition of your mind. It shines mind. Think of mind as inert objects. Self is that light. Whatever be the composition of your mind, that is the lens with which you view the world. That doesn't mean you are the mind. Let me repeat. Whatever the composition of your mind, yourself would back that. And because of that contaminated air that the light goes through, you see a distorted image, isn't it? If light goes through an impure air with a lot of dust particles, you see a different image, isn't it? But if light goes through vacuum space, there is nothing for the light to illumine. That's why when light travels from the sun to the earth, it seems that it illumines only when it is closer to the atmosphere. No, that's because the atmosphere is impure. Atmosphere has a lot of matter in it, in small particles and dirt and dust and atmospherical particles. Light seemed to be dark from the moment it left the sun till the moment it hit the earth's atmosphere. Where was this light from the sun till the earth? Why does it show only after it hits the earth? The interplanetary spaces are dark, isn't it? But similarly, the moon reflects the light of the sun. We all know that. But where was that light till it reached the moon? You can only see the moon, you can see the sun, but where did the light come from? Where is the light traveling? So light itself has no color. Light has no color, isn't it? It needs something to illumine. The moment you illumine something, you can see that something. Similarly, your own self, which is that feeling of I am that you have now, it's not something esoteric you need to reach. Please, it is not. It is not after 30 years of penance I become the self. It's not. It's not a matter of cause and effect. I do these three things, I'll reach the self. It's not a matter of time. If I keep at some karma for 30 years, I'll reach the self. It's not a matter of space. If I go to a temple 5 times a day, I'll reach the self. All those could be conditions for you to get into a more satsang and sattvic mind, which is fine. But self doesn't require you to do anything. Why? Because it's outside of time, space, and causation. But in this light example again, self is similar. That feeling of I am that you have now, that is the self. Not contact, not before it passes through the contents of your mind. The moment it passes through the contents of your mind, what you see is illumination, not what is illumining. I don't know whether if I'm communicating. so, so, so the moment light passes through dirt in the air, what you see is the illumination. You don't see light that is illumining, because light that is illumining is not an object of experience. It's the subject, but is illumining everything in its path. Similarly, the self is not an object of experience, meaning it's not an illumination. When the self passes through the waker, your mind, it illumines your temperament in the waker world. However, when you sleep in the night, there is no waker mind to illumine. But that doesn't mean you're not there. You were there in the dream itself, isn't it? That's why you woke up and know that I was there in the dream as well. I experienced the dream. Who experienced the dream? Not your waker body, not your waker mind, but you experience your dream. That you is the self. What does it illumine? It illumines the dreamer's life and world and mind. In your deep sleep, when you have no dreams as well, the self still exists, but it doesn't illumine anything. That is like light between two planets. The light travels from sun all the way to earth, but it doesn't illumine anything in its path. Does that mean light does not exist? It exists. Does that mean light does not exist between the sun and the earth? It exists. Can you see anything? No, you can't see anything. Why? Because light in that path is not illumining anything. So your deep sleep is the state where the self alone is, but it doesn't illumine anything. Your waker state is where that I am, that self, illumines the composition of your waker's mind. The moment it illumines, you assume to become the illumination, but you're not the illumination. You are what is illumining your mind. You're not what is being illumined, which is the mind. Experience the world through your mind, but you are what is illumining the mind. So if you're able to catch the concept of I am before it illumines, I am Aditya, I am a boy, I am a son, I am a husband, I am sad, I am happy. If you're able to catch that I am before it becomes any of these definitions, you capture knowledge. That is jnana vijnana yoga, not just knowledge, wisdom. And in chapter 6, what we are saying is that open eyed meditation means that you're able to capture that I am before it shines through the composition of your mind and contaminates you to think I am the illumination, not what is illumining. You're able to catch that, then through knowledge, you don't need to control the mind. You understand the do you are you able to understand the subtlety here? Why would you want to control the mind when you are not what is in the mind, you are what is illumining the mind. If you're what is illumining the mind, it will necessarily illumine what is in the mind. So instead of trying to control the mind, identify yourself with what you truly are. Then you're sidestepping the mind. You are mind is sad, you are sakshi to that, just like the light is sakshi to the earth and the moon. However, what will happen is if you sidestep the mind, over time, the mind will stabilize by itself. So sidestepping the mind does not mean you'll continue to be a terrorist. No. See, the mind by itself works only because of reinforcement. Mind also by itself does not have any desire. The mind desire works on indiscriminate reinforcement. The mind does not self propagate anything without the backing of the self. If you give it attention, it will indiscriminately reinforce things, good and bad, good and bad. That's why you go to heaven and hell, proverbial. Heaven means you're making your life better and getting a better experience of the world. Hell means you're making it worse. So good and bad. So if you're sidestepping the mind, you're observing the mind for what it is and passing it on. And over time, the momentum of the past goes down. And after a point, you're calm in any case. You can do that by controlling the mind, or you can do by knowledge, which is that I am what is illumining the mind. And you know that so intimately, my friends. You know that because without being the self, you can't recognize the mind as well. You cannot recognize an object without light illumining it, isn't it? So at any moment, if you if you are the mind, before that you necessarily are the self, because mind itself is inert. It needs that self, the life, to illuminate, right? So that's where we were in chapter 6, dhyana yoga. So meditating upon this knowledge is the only meditation there is. Of course, a yogi, as a yogi, you can also work on controlling the mind. But at the last stage of that, when you go to samadhi, it necessarily needs to be backed by the realization that you are a priori. What is a priori? A priori is what exists before experience. A priori is what is there something that pre-exists experience. Experience is created the moment the self hits the mind's composition. But what's before the experience was just the light, which is yourself. So let's go back to finish chapter 6 now. So this is the first thing we discussed last week. Probably not as emphatically as this time, but we discussed. So the second thing is Arjuna probably says what all of us are feeling at the moment. Heavy, isn't it? So let me go back to what Arjuna is saying. Whatever Arjuna says makes us feel better because he pulls back the discussion to where we want it to be. So Arjuna says in 37, if you can see my slide, he who possessed of faith is unable to control himself. He who possessed of faith is unable to control himself, whose mind wanders away from yoga. To what end does he, having failed to attain perfection in yoga, Krishna, go? Arjuna says, I'm afraid now because I have the faith. I love whatever you're saying, and I truly believe you, Krishna. There is no doubt for me that what you're saying is wrong. But what about people who have the faith, who are in the good path, who are doing everything good. They're not doing bad. They're virtuous. They're following all your advice. They're living life with a spirit of service. But what if they're not able to reach that final stage of realization, the samadhi or aham brahmasmi? Fallen from this, does that person not perish like a rent cloud, deluded in the path of Brahman? This doubt of mine, Krishna dispel completely, because it's not possible for anybody else to dispel this but you. And we ended last week by saying, Krishna says very beautifully, and this sloka gives a lot of comfort to all of us. And I'm going to ask you why, because I had requested you to think about this sloka. So be ready to give your perspective shortly. In short, O Partha, that is, O Arjuna, nay, don't worry. Krishna's words of comfort, because this is not the ultimate truth. This is not where he wants Arjuna to finally reach. But he's telling Arjuna, don't worry, neither in this world nor in the next world is there destruction for that person. None verily who strives to be good, O my son, ever comes to grief. What does he mean?
Aditya, here the person who is in the.
Sorry, who is this?
Hi, myself Jay Kumar.
Hi, Jay Kumar.
Good morning. Yeah, the person who is in the process of devoting himself in the process of service, he'll always get good in return. So the negotiation would be good. Like he will get all. It's like life is like a mirror. He will get all the good things in return. So there is no question of for destruction and something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. Anybody else who did your homework?
The person,
Yeah,
the person who is trying to alleviate himself, he is never concerned with the outcome, and he's never concerned with the pain, and he's never concerned with the joy. He's just concerned with uplifting himself. So for him, there's no pain and there's no joy. It's just a continuous process to uplift himself, and he's so connected with that he's always above grief and always above joy. So he's always at peace, he's always stable, he's always calm. So there is no grief for such people.
correct. Thank you. Anybody else?
Aditya, Samir here.
Yes, Samir.
Hi. I think the two worlds being referred, is it the conscious and the subconscious world that is being referred, is what I thought. And in case if the actions are clear, then there won't be any issues in either world, like subconscious, because it comes back. It is said that everything that we do comes back to us.
Yeah.
So probably the other world is what I...
Yeah. Thanks, Samir. Anybody else?
Yeah, Aditya, good morning, Nikhil here.
Hi.
I think the way I see this sentence is that Krishna is emphasizing more on the journey and the process rather than the result.
Mhm.
He is empathizing with the fact that, yes, maybe in his lifetime, a person cannot achieve the result, but whatever he is trying or he is striving to be the good will definitely pave certain fruits maybe in his next birth, right? So he shouldn't be sad about it, whereas continuously work towards the upliftment.
Right. Correct. Anybody else?
And it's about faith also. I am not, about faith. Just having faith is more than sufficient. You need not have to worry for anything. That is also a thought just arised in my mind. So the faith is very, very important. It will save, it will take care of rest of the things.
Correct. Very well said, Prasad. Anybody else? Okay. So wonderful answers. So let's see what Krishna answers now. So what does he mean by that? He says, see, for a person with faith and a person who's striving, jihad, to struggle and to strive internally, but who doesn't attain perfection yet. What is when Krishna says perfection? Krishna says getting outside the cycle of samsara and karma, which is self-realization, which is tattvam asi, which is nirvikalpa samadhi. And Arjuna says, I am doing my jihad. I am having faith, but I'm not there yet. Krishna initially says self-realization is an instantaneous process with knowledge. It doesn't need to take cause and effect to it because self is outside cause and effect. So if you truly understand what we have discussed in the first 40 minutes in this class, you are liberated this moment. It doesn't matter whether you've reinforced more intensely or less intensely. It doesn't matter whether you're tamasic or rajasic. It doesn't matter whether you're a saint or a sinner. The moment you realize what we discussed in this class till now, which is you are a priori, you are what is illumining, not illumination. Unfortunately, you can see the contamination, you can't see the light. Therefore, you assume to be the mind, but you always see that separation intuitively in any way. You know you are not the mind. The mind is the object of experience. That's why you are sad, you are happy. It's not happy is happy, sad is sad. No, you are sad. Happy is not happy. You are happy. Who's the you behind that happiness? What is experiencing the mind? Drig Drishya Viveka. We've seen in Jnana Yogas. Drig Drishya Viveka is the seer and the seen. If you take it back, you realize you hit the final subject. That subject is the self. That subject cannot experience itself because subject can only experience an object. All that is fine. So self-realization is instantaneous. But Arjuna is saying, what if I'm not there yet? So the question itself is a little wonky. So Arjuna basically is like us, who probably is trying to observe the self through his mind. This is a very subtle point. When we try to analyze or cognitively understand what Brahman is, we are using the equipment of the mind to understand the self. It is like the illumination is trying to understand what is illumining. It's not possible. What is illumining can light the illumination, not the other way, meaning the self is required to illumine the mind. The mind cannot, within its realm, try to conceptualize the self. It's like saying the hierarchy is important here. The eyes can observe this phone. The phone cannot observe the eyes. Between my eyes and the eyes are the seer. The phone is the seen. The seen cannot observe the seer. My mind can observe the eyes, observing the phone. My eyes cannot observe the mind. It's a hierarchy, isn't it? It's a feudal system. It's a hierarchy. The self can observe the mind, not observe the mind. The self is motiveless. The self illumines the mind. Your mind cannot conceptualize the self. It can, cognitively, it can. Mind and intellect can cognitively conceptualize, but that will never deliver. That's why, just because you're in the path of spirituality 30 years, 40 years, it doesn't promise everlasting happiness. It doesn't promise self-realization, because all this while you're using your mind as a faculty to understand the self. How can the mind understand the self? The mind is what is keeping you away from the self. What is observing the mind is who you are. So you can't get into the mind and then go back to the self. What is observing a priori is who you are. So Arjuna says the question is a little flawed because he says, what if I'm not able to reach the self? You're not reaching the self, you are the self. You're trying to reach the self through the mind. That's the problem. Then you say, I'm Sakshi. No, it's the mind playing witness to itself. You're fooling yourself that that's the self. No. Mindfulness of today, for which CEOs pay hundreds and thousands of dollars, is about the mind observing itself, which is a useful first step. Your mind calming itself down, right? When you're angry, you're telling yourself that you're angry. You're observing what's happening in your own mind, your emotions, your hormones. This is your mind observing itself. But you can't conceptualize the self because what you're trying to do is, I want to experience what self feels like. The moment I experience what self feels like, I'll make a choice to give up the world or take the self. It's like, right? So I want to have a feel of what the self feels like, and then I'll make a choice for Vairagya. But you can't experience what self feels like. The subject cannot experience itself. You can experience what the self feels like if you're trying to experience the self through your mind, but that's not the self. That's your mind experiencing its own self, the calmness. Mind experiencing the intellect. That is not true. The self cannot be experienced, but the self you are, how do you know you are? The feeling of agency you have, that's the self. But you can't experience it because that's the life in you that's experiencing your mind. So Arjuna's question is, what if my mind disallows me to experience the self? And that's why Krishna says, calm down. There is no loss of effort. See, everything that we are studying here, friends, last 6 months or so, and going forward, there is no loss of effort, whether you get it, whether you don't get it, whether it's easy, whether it's tough. Each of us have a different starting point. So there is no comparison here. Life is not equal. We are born with our own starting points of mind's temperament. So, but there is no loss of effort for any of us. We are all climbing the ladder, isn't it? We may be in different rungs to start with, but but keeping at it does not make you go down. It always makes you go higher. There is no loss of effort in the path of truth, in the path of dharma, in the path of spirituality. So let's see what Krishna says in the next few slokas. Some of you I know have read it because you WhatsApp me and emailed me, and I appreciate that. So 41. Having attained to the worlds of the righteous, and having dwelt there for everlasting years, he who had fallen from yoga is born again in a house of pure and wealthy, or he is even born in the family of wise yogis. Verily, Arjuna, a birth like this is very difficult to obtain in this world. There he comes to be united with the knowledge acquired in his former body and strives more than before for perfection. By that very former practice, he is borne on in spite of himself. Even he who merely wishes to know yoga goes beyond just the name and form, shabdas. So what Krishna is hinting here to Arjuna is that there's no loss of effort. One, if you do good, the law of karma necessitates your experience in life will be good. You will go to heaven. Heaven means what? In our concept here, there is no heaven and hell. There is no heaven and hell when it comes to what we're discussing. See, when you go to sleep, if you go to sleep with unfinished business tonight, you should have sent 4 emails that you don't send. If you have some client work that you promised this evening, but you don't send it, and you go to sleep, because sleep is a good escape route, isn't it? It's a welcome. Without sleep, there's no break to attention. We carry the world on our head. So sleep is a good break from. Have you ever felt when you go to sleep, oh, thank God, I get at least 6 hours of break from this torture called life? Shouldn't feel that, but if you feel that, it's not your fault. It's the mind, isn't it? But how do you wake up? Do you wake up to a different world than how you left it? No. Sleep is a good break for 6 7 hours, but if you have unfinished business, you will wake up into that unfinished business. The tension that left you when you went to sleep is the same tension that will come back to you. How can morning be any different from how you left it in the night? The temperaments, the guilt that you haven't done something is the guilt that you wake up with. The satisfaction of having completed daily work daily is the joy with which you wake up with the next morning. So, so it seems like an escape, but when you wake up the next morning, you wake up to where you left. Death is not dissimilar to that. And this is a tough concept of death because the way we see death is very different all our lives. Another wrong assumption. You talk about wrong assumptions, why we're not getting traction in spirituality? Because of wrong assumptions. We talked about cause effect assumption. Another assumption is this: we are all trained to be afraid of death. We're all trained to be afraid of death. We're all afraid of death because we will leave our loved ones in this world. A wise person of logic would never be afraid of death because death is inevitable. Whether you are afraid or not, you're going to die soon. 80 years, 90 years, even if you live 100, you'll die. You may die a long, suffering death or easy, quick death. So this is not what you should be afraid of. Birth is what you should be afraid of. It doesn't even make sense, isn't it? Let me explain. So death is nothing to be afraid of because death is inevitable. And death is, in fact, if you're on the right path, you welcome death because death may cease the necessity to be born again. Birth is what you need to be afraid of because this entire chakra of samsara, you have to live all over again. But death is no different from deep sleep. There are subtle differences academically, but for us to understand, there is no difference. You cannot be born. You cannot be born different from your temperament when you died. See, the subtle body doesn't die, just like your subtle body does not die when you go to sleep. Your physical body goes to sleep, but you don't wake up another person, isn't it? You wake up with your own, you're the beneficiaries of your own mind, you're the victim of your own mind, you wake up with. So death is just a pause button, a longer deep sleep. But where does the desire, where does the vasanas imprint go? The vasanas imprint are intact. It requires expression. It creates a supply, not what you want, fairy tale. It creates a supply, the world depends on what your vasanas require. So if you're a selfish person, necessarily you see a selfish world, isn't it? If you're a pathological liar, necessarily you live a world where you are afraid that other people are lying to you. If you're a kind person, you necessarily see a world where people are lovely people, people are nice people. In our own lives, you observe that. Death is very similar. You're born in a place which resonates with where you left. That's why some people even vested to good things. If you are a owner of an NGO who has saved millions of people in this world, and the only reason you don't want to die is because if you die, who is going to help all these people, all these poor children, poor elders? So you're born with a heavy desire to help. There is a high form of doership that I am helping. So what's the demand, sir, in your mind? The demand is your mind is that if I am born again, I want to be able to help even more people. So unselfish, a good desire to have. But you're not neutralizing the desire. You still have the desire because you have doership of helping. So what happens logically? Whether you go to sleep that night, you wake up in the morning. What does a passionate person wake up with? They want to wake up being better today than yesterday. So a person with a high desire to help who always wants to help more people today than he was able to yesterday. He's trying to scale up his NGO so that he can help 100,000 more people. Death is not dissimilar. The subtle mind, the vasana imprint in the causal mind, has that desire. It doesn't have a body to express. Your body has become old and weary and you're dead. You will be necessarily born with the same demand. The demand doesn't go anywhere else. So if that's the demand, what will be the supply, sir? The supply will be a world where more people are suffering. The supply will be more children without homes, more older people without care. Why? So that you can go help them, isn't it? So that there is supply for to quench your demand, and with a good demand, like wanting to help the world, requires a world where there is suffering that you can go be that knight in the shining armor. You can ride that white horse and save the world. That is the stupidity of samsara. That is the stupidity even of benevolent ego. That is the stupidity even of virtue. Because virtue promises you happiness, of course. You are there to save the world and you're kept in high esteem in the world. You're a king among the kings. You get a Padma Shri, Padma Vibhushan in your next birth or this birth. But you're still in the trap of samsara. But loss of effort is never there. Meaning, if you have spiritually edified yourself when you're alive, the extent to which you're spiritually edified today, yeah, on Saturday, is the knowledge with which you're born tomorrow, with which you wake up tomorrow, isn't it? You're the seeds that you sowed today in terms of your knowledge. You're attending this class. You've elevated what you know. So tomorrow you cannot go back to how you were on Friday. You will necessarily be what you are on Saturday is an extension of Sunday. Friday doesn't jump into Sunday. If you've transformed yourself on Saturday, you don't need to be afraid that what if I wake up as Friday? No, Saturday will kickstart your Sunday. Sunday will kickstart your Monday. Monday will kickstart your Tuesday. So every day, if you become better, the next day is necessarily a better experience than the previous day. Similarly, Krishna says, for a person in the path of yoga, there is no loss of effort because whatever your desires are, that desire is getting purified. And the next birth, when he says you'll be born in a family of yogis, what he's saying is you'll be born ahead of the curve that will quickly take you back to your purpose in life, which is you may not be able to do that this birth, but you'll be born ahead of the curve next birth. Next birth means next projection, where you'll be able to take the U-turn faster. He says, in spite of yourself, chapter verse 44 is interesting because he says, in spite of yourself, there'll be no loss of effort. Meaning, whatever be your circumstances, your gunas will come out. So, Arjuna, even if you are born in a gutter next birth, you will probably be faster in yoga than a person born in a Brahmin family, so to speak. Because that is what we call Brahmin family these days are just a matter of birth, isn't it? That's not what Krishna is saying. Krishna is saying you may be born in a gutter, still you'll be a yogi faster than a person born in a so-called Brahmin family, but is probably highly desirous of the world. So in spite of your circumstances, your true gunas will show up. See, we observe that itself, isn't it? In spite of circumstances, our true gunas are the only thing we know. In spite of, okay, I'm in Stratford upon Avon, the birthplace of Shakespeare. And in most of Shakespearean plays, talks about any of the tragedies, it's all about the kings and queens. Interestingly, the queens and princesses are famous to never be happy. All princesses and queens are always in a state of despair and stress. I don't know why. I don't know why. The queens have everything. They have the entire palace, empire. They have whatever clothes to wear, whatever to do, whoever to talk to. But the typical archetype of a princess is always sad and waiting for her lover to take her away. I don't know why. A very cliche way of story writing, probably true of that time. So even if you're a princess and queen, you'll your experience of life is hostage to your gunas. Even if you are a fisherman or a peasant, you can, if your gunas are in spite of your circumstances, your gunas will show up. Therefore, if you invest time in good things, in spite of your circumstances, that goodness will come home to roost for you. It's a very strong message. So there is no pressure here that I'm not able to get the core of spirituality. I'm not able to get Brahmasmi. It's okay. As long as you have faith and as long as you're doing good things, your own experience of life will only keep improving. You don't need to understand Aham Brahmasmi. Your own happiness will still increase. That is also delusion, but your experience of life will be much better. And birth after birth, you will do the right thing. Again, birth after birth is not some rebirth. The birth after birth is just like morning after each night. So, and the last three slokas of chapter 6 is, he says, even he who, in 44 we ended by saying, even he who merely wishes to know yoga goes beyond this. 45. But the yogi who strives with assiduity, purified from sins and perfected gradually, through many births, attains the highest goal. So if you continue to keep faith. So I have a question here. At one hand, we're saying that self-realization is an instantaneous process. You either know or you don't know. Yaha pashyati sa pashyati. He who sees, sees. When the penny drops, it drops. You may be a terrorist, and a Vivekananda takes the same time to be self-realized in the path of knowledge. We're saying it's instantaneous process because you are already the self. At another time in 45, Krishna is saying that if you keep striving, purified from your sins and perfected gradually through many births, you reach the self. How do you settle this contradiction? What is he meaning here? Anybody?
What
My
he's trying to
understand.
Yeah, Abhishek first, then Prasad.
Yes, sir.
what
Abhishek?
he's trying to say what he's trying to say out here is that we already have a backlog of our past actions and reactions. So that has to first be, slowly we have to melt it away through our conscious corrective actions. So once those are, we are using those up, we are covering those up, and whatever the current good karma that we are doing, if we are not going to realize the doership, and we are not going to take the ownership of that particular action, not enjoying the benefits of those, when those are going to get accumulated, at that time only we'll get the salvation, because past bad we have covered it up, and we have whatever the bad we have done, for that we have done the repentance, realization, everything.
Sure.
And current good, when we are doing, we are not taking the ownership, we are not taking the doership, and we are not enjoying it and taking the benefit of it. So once this is totally accumulated, then we can be freed of this cycle of rebirth.
Sure. Prasad?
Yes, sir. So my understanding is self-realization is instant. It is true. At the same time, the effort, the goal towards that very moment, that fraction of moment of realization is gradual. That is what my understanding. The efforts are gradual. It leads to a particular point. In that point, the self-realization is explodes. It is instant. Like water boils up to 100 degrees a day. After that, it starts evaporating like that. So gradual also important to reach that particular explosion, which is instant. Thank you.
Correct. Wonderful answers. So both Abhishek and Prasad. Prasad, when you said, I was remember in back in school, remember in chemistry class, we all would have a pipette and burette. Pipette, the long tube and that vessel underneath. Pipette and burette is a famous thing. I hope you remember. So my chemistry teacher would tell me, Aditya, open the pipette in a way that only a drop of that substance inside falls into the burette. And she would say, exactly there should be 62 drops pouring into that. The 60-second drop will change the color of the liquid in the burette from green to yellow. So we as students would be drop one, drop two. Some people would be, what is this magic 62? Nothing is happening. I've already put 30 drops. They'll say, no, 62. I'll say, what 62? I'll open it fully. Bzz, nothing will happen because it has to be drop by drop. But 40, nothing happens. 50, nothing happens. 60, nothing happens. 61, nothing happens. 61 and second drop are same. 60-second drop falls down, the liquid turns yellow. Now, it needs faith. That's it. You don't know, because when you're in 30th drop, you don't know 60-second drop is the answer. Somebody is telling you. But you're happy with the 30th drop. You're enjoying the 30th drop. Saying, no, go on, go on. Nobody, there's no lost effort in pipette and burette. Go to 62. So at 62, it changes. What Prasad is also saying, which is when it reaches 100 degrees, water starts boiling and evaporate. But 100, 0 to 100 may not be instantaneous. Water needs to boil through 20, 30, 50, 80, and then reach 100. Prasad lives in Bangalore, so there's an example of I used to travel to Bangalore often when I used to be in Chennai. I used to love driving down to Chennai, Bangalore. Is that the route through the ECR? No, that's not the ECR route. That's the other route. Yeah. No, what highway is Chennai, Bangalore called? Not sure. Long time ago. God, because I lived in Bombay for 7 years after I leave. No, I lived in Hyderabad for a year after Chennai for my B school. Then I lived in Bombay for 6 years after Hyderabad. So when I was still in Bombay, I could still say I'm a Chennai boy by heart. But now I seem to be ignorant when I go to Chennai of, oh, is there a restaurant here? I never knew that. Oh, is there a hotel here? I never knew that. That used to be a matter of great insult for me if somebody found me wanting for knowledge in my own city. But now I'm not even claiming because I'm far removed from Chennai. I feel closer to Bombay. No, that's blasphemous on record, but I feel equally close to Bombay. It's a beautiful state. So when I used to travel from Chennai to Bangalore, see, when can I say I've reached Bangalore? I can only say I've reached Bangalore when I've taken that last step into Bangalore. I cannot stop at a village halfway to Bangalore and say, I'm in Bangalore 50% now. No, you're 50% towards Bangalore. You're not 50% in Bangalore just because you've traveled 50% of the distance. Right? You can't say, give me half the marks of me being in Bangalore. No, you are not in Bangalore. The interviewer is waiting for you in Bangalore. You cannot say, but half of me is in Bangalore. No, you're either there or you're not there. It's binary, isn't it? So for first 299 kilometers, I'm not in Bangalore, but there is no lost effort. everything is taking me closer to Bangalore. I'm only in Bangalore in that final step when I keep the leg inside Bangalore. Now I'm 100% in Bangalore. Before that, I'm 100% not in Bangalore. But all the distance is taking me closer to Bangalore. So, what Krishna is saying here, as all of you rightly said, is that if you strive through many births, meaning your Vasana imprint is becoming subtler and subtler and subtler till a point when you offer least resistance to what? Least resistance to understanding what we discussed today, which is the fact that I am is who you are. You're not searching for something esoteric. See, when you're searching for the self with your mind, you think there will be a time when there is a light in your mind, like some of these yogis describe, isn't it? There is a light, a flash of light in my mind, and I felt I was levitating. And in that levitation, I could feel that I am the world. I was in a mountain and I was suddenly thinking the trees. No, it's not really like that, according to the, the Advaita Vedantins. It's not like that. Through your mind can cheat you into believing that you see a star in your mind, that star is the self, and all of that. There's nothing so hunky dory or romantic about the self. Self is a very boring, constant concept, which you already are. That I am is because of that self. With your mind, if you're trying to conceptualize the self, you can become Hollywood director. That's why all these lot of babajis come and tell you things like you will suddenly feel some chakra open up and stuff. Chakra opening is not something that you suddenly become Superman and can fly. So, nothing is wrong. Please don't mistake me. I'm not demeaning anything. But with your mind, if you're conceptualizing something higher than the mind, it's not possible. That's like saying with a scale, with a physical scale, I'll measure time. Saying, dude, but that equipment is not meant to measure time. How can you, with a scale, you can measure distance, space, not time? It's like that. So that's what Krishna is saying here. So 46, the yogi is thought to be superior to the ascetics and even superior to men of knowledge. He is also superior to men of action. Therefore, be a yogi. This Krishna is the first guy who created this meme. Be like Bob, that meme. Bob is a nice guy. Bob goes to internet, sees comments against him. Bob does not get angry. Be like Bob. Have you seen that? Is it Bob or some other name? I don't know. I remember Bob. Be like Jack or whatever it is. So
Yeah, it's
Krishna,
Bob. Bob.
it's Bob. Be like Bob. So Krishna is the first meme creator. He says, be like that, Arjuna. So if Krishna creates a meme, he'll be like, yogi is superior to the ascetics. Who are the ascetics? Ascetics are tapasvis. Tapasvi. Who's a tapasvi? Tapasvis, ascetics, give up at the level of body. Samanas. Give up, renounce at the level of actions. And we have seen through many weeks why that's good, but that's not a yogi. Yogi is renouncing the desire backing the action, not the action itself. So he says yogi is superior to men of knowledge, jnanis, mere scholars who are academic in nature. Like academic is nature is what I said, using the mind to understand spirituality. Yogis are better because you may have a lot of knowledge about Aham Brahmasmi, but that doesn't help you in any way in terms of delivering you to liberation. Yogis are better than men of action, karma yogis, sorry, karmas, because men of action are always hostage to the results of their action in terms of good and bad, cause and effect and cause. Be a yogi, Arjuna. Be like Bob. Be a yogi. Um, Meaning, act but not backed with motive. So, desireless action. Act according to your duty. And the final sloka is, and amongst all yogis, Arjuna, he who, full of faith, with his inner self merged in me, worships me. he according to me is most devout. Krishna emphatically ends chapter 6 by saying it's a chapter of meditation, it's a chapter of open eyed meditation with knowledge of the self that we have seen in chapter 4 and chapter 5. But Krishna says being being in the path of yoga itself is there is no loss of effort. First thing he says. The second thing he says is that gradually over time you will purify yourself to reach the self. The last thing he says is even amongst all of these people who do that, a person who has shraddha. Who's shraddha? Not the actress. Shraddha is devotion. Shraddha is surrender. Shraddha is doing it with with by wearing your hijab. You know what a hijab is, not the veil. Hijab is doing it with a spirit of humility. You know, wearing your hijab in the true essence of what hijab is not the physical veil. The true essence of hijab is wear your hijab means reduce your ego, be more humble, and and be less mind driven in spirituality. So a person who has shraddha, who has devotion, who has faith, that faith in what? Not faith that there's an idol that is God, not faith in dogma, faith in the fact that this logic that what we have discussed is true. And as Krishna says, there is no loss of effort in good karma. Faith in that, even though you may not conceptualize or become the subject, become Brahman, if you have faith in what? Faith in the last five slokas, that there is no loss of effort. So half the time we feel that if I'm anyway not going to reach the self now, I'll as well do things of pleasure that my mind currently says do it. He says now have faith, because some at some point in time you have to catch the bus, no? You cannot say I've traveled half the way to Bangalore. I've not reached Bangalore, so I'll stay there and then complain that you're not in Bangalore. You have to have faith that if you do 299 kilometers, the 300 kilometer will deliver. In the pipette and burette, I have to have faith that I see my eyes don't see any reaction till 60 drops, so I will stop there. No, Shraddha will take me to the 62nd drop and then it will deliver. Krishna says, have faith. Without faith, all of this is simple knowledge that you are validating with your ego. Nothing will happen without faith. Faith is very important, but not faith on what anybody and everybody says. Faith on your own journey. As is your mind, so is the word. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to introduce you to what is next, and so that I see that a lot of you over recent past have started spending a lot more time between two Sundays on the text, which of course is the right thing to do. We are not going into this now, but the next chapter, what you see on screen is chapter 7, the path of knowledge and wisdom. We have talked about jnana so far. We have not talked about vijnana, which is wisdom. Wisdom is the supreme reality, and it's an exhilarating chapter. So meanwhile, thank you and have a great week ahead and stay connected. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya.
Aditya.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you so much.
Aditya, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Thank
Aditya.
you so much.
Very well said, Abhishek. So